Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I love having you back here. And for those of you that are new, hi, I'm Stephanie and I make videos on the topic of language learning. Now if you're a returning viewer and you're like, where have you been? I just had a lot going on, so it was a bit difficult for me to make videos for a while, but I'm back. And actually kind of the way my channel started, like me filming on a couch, well, I'm sort of back to that now. And in today's video, what I want to do is talk about what part of language learning is the hardest. I think that is a wonderful question to tackle. So without further ado, let's go on. So language learning can be a bit tricky when it comes to categorizing what part is the hardest. And I feel like so many people will tell you different things, and I feel like I have a very unpopular opinion, so I wanted to share it with you today. Now, oftentimes whenever you ask that question, people imagine like very advanced levels, and they usually talk about, you know, how difficult it is to get that finer nuance of like be it idioms or like language on the street, or perhaps academic language is highly complex, or perhaps just learning to use a subjunctive in Spanish. I don't know. Whatever it is, people usually have quite a lot of opinion on that, and they think that, you know, the further you go, and they give you examples of all these complicated grammar points and complicated expressions and all of those really high level skills. But the fact that something is high level doesn't necessarily mean it's hard. So I really don't think that level is hard, because at that point you've already done so much, you've already spent so much time with the language, you've conquered the intermediate plateau, and you're just kind of polishing the language. So although it seems super hard from the perspective of an onlooker or from the perspective of a beginner, it's not necessarily that hard, it's just polishing the language. So I feel like when you're advanced and you're polishing, you're trying to get fluent, that's the easiest part of learning a language. I know it's counterintuitive because it's the most complicated stuff, but at the end of the day, to get to the most complicated stuff, you've already traveled such a long road that was much bumpier and much more difficult, and polishing is really not that hard. And I feel like the majority of people, you know, of course there's some people that think advanced is the hardest, usually people that don't have as much experience with language learning, I'd argue. And then people that have a lot of experience with language learning, I feel like so many of them would give the answer the intermediate plateau. Now that is the hardest stage, because you feel like you're not progressing, you feel like it's aptly named, you've hit this plateau, and no matter how much you keep going, it still feels like you're not going anywhere. You put in the hours, you put in so much practice of so many different skills, and it feels like no matter what you do, you're not learning anything. I've made a video about this, of how to overcome it, and I've spoken about how this is mostly in your head. How this is mostly, you know, you've already learned the 1,000, 2,000 most common words in that language that pack the biggest punch. And so obviously other words that you see when you're intermediate are going to be less common. And so you don't see them as much. And so you don't feel like you're learning as much. Or for example, you know, just learning a bit more doesn't have that much of an impact. Be it, I don't know, it doesn't matter what, expressions, grammar, whatever. It doesn't have that much of an impact when you're intermediate as it did when you were a beginner. So you don't get this wow factor as easily at the intermediate stage. And it can feel like you're not progressing, but you're always progressing. And maybe it's just not as fast. And I've given tips and tricks on how to speed that up, so check out that video if you're interested. But again, I don't think that the intermediate plateau is the hardest part. It can be challenging if you don't have this belief that you're constantly learning, right? If you don't understand what the intermediate plateau is. But once you understand what it is, once you understand what it's all about, once you realize that it's really about mostly an impression that you're not progressing, but that you actually are, then you have a completely different way to think about it. You get a completely different mindset, and you're like, okay, I'm still learning. I just have to like maybe switch my resources, maybe do something a bit more challenging, maybe take a break for a while and then come back to it with a completely like revamped way of studying whatever it is. It usually requires shuffling things around a bit, but intermediate plateau is not that difficult, I would say, to overcome. And so here's my answer. I think the most difficult part of learning a language is the beginning. Right at the beginning stage. Like, you might be thinking, look, Stephanie, this is crazy. How can learning to say hello, how are you? How is that even difficult? How can that be difficult? Right? How is that possible? Well, I think it is. I think it is very difficult because everything is new. Like, looking from the outside in, you might be thinking, okay, well, this is just the very basics of a language. Of course, it's the simplest stuff. It's not very complex points of grammar like at the advanced level. It's not like at the intermediate plateau level where you're like getting over this big hump. It's just learning numbers and colors and greetings. Yes, that is very true. But it is also something brand new. Even if you're not learning a new alphabet, writing system, etc. Even if the language is similar to one you already speak even, still it is learning to express yourself in a completely new way. And that is what makes it very difficult. And I think that even if you're learning the simplest stuff, it can feel like a huge deal. And every little bit of progress, that's why, right, that's a big part of why we feel the intermediate plateau, because every little bit of progress in the beginning is just like this huge thing, because there was nothing there before. And when you start from zero and when you start from nothing, it can be extremely challenging. Don't even get me started if you have to learn a whole new writing system, and even if it's more complex. Right? I'm not talking about something super simple like learning the Cyrillic alphabet. I'm talking about what if you gotta learn the Arabic one, or Chinese, or even Cyrillic. To learn to read in a new alphabet, even a simple one like that, will take time. And again, even if you have none of that, still learning to express yourself, even at the high how are you level, in a new language, is the biggest jump. You're going from nothing to something. And that is the hardest thing. Like, to me, I don't even know why numbers are super hard. I don't know, I just can't get used to numbers for a very long time. Numbers in a new language, they tend to come late. And they're supposed to be super simple. Like, what do you mean? It's just numbers. But at the end of the day, they do tend to come late. And I think most of the basics do. I'm giving this example with numbers because they're the bane of my existence. But numbers aside, whenever it is about that level, you feel like totally doing something totally new for the first time. Think of riding a bike. Riding a bike might be super simple and you're like, that is so easy, but that is so easy because you already know how to do it. When you got on a bike for the first time as a child, I bet you thought it's super hard and yeah, you fell a few times, etc. It's the same thing with languages. So don't get fooled that, there's this plateau that you've reached, etc., or you're the advanced level and you're learning super complicated grammar. It's never going to be as hard as the beginning, and it's important to start. That is the most important thing. Just get started with a language. You will see that, once you're past that beginner stage, things will get easier and easier. I know it's counterintuitive because you're learning more and more complicated things, but still, things get easier and easier. But speaking of easy and hard, you know my stance on this channel. You know that I believe in learning through passion, that I believe in learning through stories and through comprehensible input. And I've made multiple videos on the topic, right? I talked about comprehensible input and crashing. I've talked about stories and how, we employ them, for example, in business school, not just in language learning. In many different disciplines, stories are wonderful. But did you know that there's actually a whole company that was built around story learning? Aptly named Story Learning. It is a great place to go for if you're looking for language learning advice or if you're looking for great content to learn languages. Story learning uses contextual immersion, which is a great application of the principles of comprehensive input and of the engaging power of stories. Story learning was founded by Ollie Richards, a quite famous polyglot that I'm sure, as viewers of my channel, you're familiar with him already. And the whole philosophy behind story learning revolves around contextual immersion, getting that comprehensible input, getting immersed in the power of stories and learning through them, learning through narrative, learning in an interesting and engaging manner in a way that is honestly helps integrate the language much better, helps memorize, helps reproduce later when it comes time to speak. Because learning through stories, as I've mentioned multiple times on this channel, is the ultimate experience for language learning. It is the ultimate learning experience as it engages the brain and in a way that nothing else can. Simply part of human nature and the way that we have evolved throughout the centuries to receive information. So if you engage in the story learning method, you're going to engage in a method that's been proven by science to be quite effective at multiple fields, especially language learning, and you're going to get this cultural awareness and honestly very relatable and easy to use language, that is actually the way that people speak. If you're interested to learn more about the story learning method, the company is kind enough to send you a free story learning kit for you to learn more about how you can apply that method to your own language learning. You can follow the link in the description below to get your copy. Within that kit, you're going to find the complete guide to story learning as explained by Ollie Richards, the science behind it all, why your brain loves stories, and how to exactly implement the story learning method in your own language learning. You're also going to learn about how to read effectively in a foreign language, how to double your memory for new vocabulary, as in how to contextualize, be fluent, and be able to use that vocabulary, how to effortlessly understand audio from stories, and then also, by extension, also spoken language, how to find people that you can practice your language with. In addition to all of that, you also get a study planner that you can print out for your own use and reference. I'll also include links to the uncovered courses by Story Learning so that you can check those out and see if you might be interested in following such a course. I think they're a great option, honestly, because they offer engaging and immersive learning. They offer interactive learning activities at your own convenience. You also get community support and positive feedback, and you're able to actually connect with others that are also interested in learning. I'm a big believer in community. You also know that I'm a huge believer in stories, and it is my preferred way of learning. I read a lot, I listen a lot, and I think that when it comes to the story learning method, we can all learn a bit more about how to learn most effectively from stories by going through that kit, by going through the courses, etc. So I definitely recommend that for you. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm always here to answer them. I think that when it comes to language learning, it's very important to learn through the power of stories, because that is what makes language learning easier. I know in this whole video I described different stages of language learning, right? Which is easiest, which is hardest, but at the end of the day, there's challenges at every stage, and I feel like stories alleviate a lot of those challenges. Stories are the most effective way to learn, and I do stand behind that firmly. It's how I've learned every language that I speak. And I think that not only are they super efficient, but they're also a great way to just make things a bit easier when you hit a rough spot. So do check it out. Do let me know what you think of story learning, what you thought of the kit, what your opinions on it are. And if you do end up taking one of the courses, I'd love to see what you thought of that course as well. I hope that I was useful for you, and until next time, I'd love to see you here. Bye for now, and have a wonderful one.